Hey YouTube, today I want to talk about something that bothers me. This bugs me. Um, but I also want to touch on some other topics, things I don't normally talk about within um, concepts of reloading ammunition. Um, which I don't really do any videos on because a lot of people already do that. I mean, the information's already very plentiful, so there's no reason to talk about it. But um, when they're talking about your case prep and stuff like that, they tell you, make sure you have, inspect every round and make sure that you sort out ones that have heavy corrosion and ones that have cracks or bends over 30 degrees in the case mouth, like creases and so forth. But they don't talk to you about what it looks like actually showing it to you always. They don't always show you what symptoms of pressure signs look like beyond like primers. They'll show you like symptoms of back pressure or high pressures on the primer itself of a spent casing, but they don't really show you what the outcome can be. They don't teach you to inspect your rounds before you put them in your weapon, which should be really important. And you'd think you order rounds from the factory, you would think that they would always be good, but they're not always good. Sometimes they're not. And anyway, recently I went and I did a trade with a guy for some stuff I didn't need or want, for that matter, for some money and some 45 ACP ammunition. This ammunition was reloads. I knew that going into it, and I was okay with that. We'll sort of start off by saying it was around 200 rounds of 45 ACP, likely 230 grain full metal jackets. I have no idea what the load data on them is. And this guy, he got them from a guy he worked with, or not worked with, that he played softball with, and beyond that has no knowledge of his reloading experience other than that he reloads. So I knew going in there was a bit of a risk, and that was okay. I'm usually pretty careful about what I put through my firearms. And so when I got home, as I do, I inspected each and every case before I filtered them in with my other rounds, which they're still segregated for obvious reasons. But what I found in there, even though it's only 2 rounds, is startling, to say the least. This first one I ran across, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a close up, but I'll also try to include some high def photos with it. But here's the first one. Give it a sec to see if it shows up. If you can actually see the damage that's on that. Do you see how it's actually cracked there? It's actually opened up and buckled. Oops. And at the round itself, it's buckled. And you can see that more notably if you look at the profile. Trying to get it in the photo. Gosh, it's so hard to see on video. It's hard to see it on video, but it is actually very pronounced. And then additionally, you can see that the way that the round is seated, about 40% of it is actually sticking out of the inside of the case mouth. And that the case mouth itself is actually embedded itself partway into the projectile. For obvious reasons, this round is not safe to fire, and I severely doubt it would even chamber into my 1911, nor would I even try. So that upset me a bit. Not because it's just a bad round, but because nobody's bothered to inspect these. The projectile itself doesn't show any signs of being pinched or having been dropped, and I highly doubt that would do this much. I mean, this is definitely the result of improper projectile seating, and that's that really. That's the best way to put that. Which means he improperly opened the case mouth, which means that possibly the charges could be off. A veritable smorgasbord of things could be wrong with these rounds. Then later on in the batch, and this one may be harder to see, but this round here, and I'm going to try to get it real close. Let's see if I can see it. Gosh, that's hard to see. Anyway, on this round, the case mouth is actually cracked down about 45-50% of the length of the casing. Once again, either weakened case or improper case widening before seating the projectile. And that scares me. I mean, a ratio of 2 out of 200 is not a bad ratio, but holy smokes. That made it into a batch of live ammunition that guy was pulling rounds out of to fire. Could you imagine? I mean, it only takes one round. It only takes one bad round. Additionally, we'll talk about some of the other things because I do quite a bit of case cleaning. And I have just, I probably have 30 or 40 examples of bad cases, but here's one obviously that is not going to be used for reloading. And if you look at it, you can actually see there is a pretty significant bend in the case mouth. That might be repairable, but I'm not going to bother trying. And since I don't shoot 40 Smith & Wesson, those casings are up for sale anyways, so I don't care. The next one's interesting because this came out of a batch of range ammunition or range casings that I didn't fire, and this is probably the most impressive example of of pressure issues, or honestly out of battery detonation is probably the best way to look at that. Gosh, look at all the distortion on that casing. You know, that's some serious distortion. And you know, when you have stuff like this, and you don't pay attention to what the heck you're doing, you can hurt yourself or damage your firearm. And it bothers me that that these rounds made it into a batch of ammunition. Not only that the owner was shooting out of, but that he sent that bag of ammunition with his friend. His friend was shooting out of that bag of ammunition, and then he sold it to me as good ammunition. And that's not even to you know, I'm not trying to be a dick, but you know, that's ridiculous. That's just, honestly, it's a result of being irresponsible. As sad as that is to say. I'm gonna read part of what I sent this guy because I was pretty concerned at that point. I'll leave his name out, of course. So I got around to looking at these reloads, contacting you because I'm a bit concerned about these rounds now. Before you read on, please see the attached photos. Photo 1, nickel-plated casing that is alone in the photo, cracked and buckled casing with improperly seated projectile. Photo 2 shows a different angle, that shows about 40% of the projectile is seated outside of the casing, etc., etc. These rounds were clearly improperly loaded, etc., etc., etc. These rounds were taken from soft surface to soft surface and not dropped or mishandled at any time in my possession. So it did not happen during transit, at least not while in my possession. So I can rule that out. But before I put any of these rounds in my handgun, I do need to know, did you personally fire any of the rounds out of this batch? Do you have any knowledge of the skill level of the person who reloaded these rounds? Do I need to be worried that these rounds are going to grenade my handgun? And then I went on to talk a little more about it, but I got the following response from him. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that, you know, complacency kills. Complacency is dangerous. And that's what this is the result of. This is the result of complacency on at least the part of 3 individuals. At least. So here's his response. Wow, I did not QA these, but got, I believe, about 250 rounds from him. I played softball with him and knew he reloaded, so that's all I know. I shot 1 clip, and a friend shot whatever was missing in the bag. Looks to be around 50 rounds total. I wouldn't shoot these 2 either, personally. Yeah, no shit. And then he goes on to offer me to make a trade back if I feel that I need to do that in an effort to make it right. I'm not going to do that for a lot of reasons, because I'm not going to drive 60 miles one way again to meet with this guy in an effort to swap back these rounds. I'm just going to have to proceed with caution and hope that I don't lose a hand. So I'm certainly interested in finding out what other people think. I mean, obviously these 2 rounds are not going to go in and be fired. But all the other rounds look real good. I scrutinize each and every one of them carefully. Obviously, I don't know the load data. But what would you do in my position? Would you make the trade back? Would you fire the rounds? Would you sell them? What would you do with them?